Thank you for joining us here on the Drive Back YouTube channel. And it's the first YouTube video we've done in a little while, so thanks for bearing with us. We're going to be doing a review for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is directed by Michael Chavez and stars Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, and John Noble. The Warrens are brought in to help defend a man in court who said he was possessed by a demon when he committed the murderous crime he is accused of. So this is actually based on a real-life court case, and is going to go ahead and bring me to my first critique of this movie. They do not focus on it enough. My big fear for this movie was established very early. That they weren't really going to do any of the courtroom drama. They weren't going to focus on that. They wanted to tell this other horror story, which didn't really land. And that's the biggest problem with this movie. This movie doesn't know what it wants to be.
Yeah, I think when I first saw the trailer, I was very much ready for a Exorcism of Emily Rose movie. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not.
But that movie is much more heavily based in the courtroom in whether the exorcism was malpractice and deadly. So it's more like it's a very big court movie. Mm-hmm. So I was really expecting, especially with the trailer of him saying, with Ed Warren saying the courtroom acknowledges the existence of God every time someone takes a stand. It's about time they acknowledge the devil. I thought this movie was going to be 90% court bait, or at least around the court, and it's maybe two scenes.
Yeah.
They brush over it so quickly.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because that's what I wanted it to be, which I thought would have been an interesting departure from the other Conjuring films.
You should watch Emily Rose. I think you'd like it.
I'll have to check it out. But I don't want to sound negative nearly about this movie. This movie is still very strong compared to the other Conjuring films.
I think this is the weakest of the three.
It's the weakest of the three. I'm talking specifically above Annabelle and The Nun.
Oh, sure, yeah.
This is probably the third best film in the franchise, third or fourth, easily. Mm-hmm. I would say this is probably about tied with Annabelle Creation for me. Which is great because this is the same director as Curse of La Llorona, and this is a massive step forward for that director.
Oh yeah. Well, I also think the property, he had more to work with for sure in The Conjuring than he did in La Llorona for sure.
Definitely, and it shows. While it doesn't feel like a James Wan film, it feels like he is trying to imitate James Wan in a way that's more like trying to fit with the franchise and not him experimenting, which is very nice. But this movie is also not a problem. It's not as scary as the first two.
So the first thing I said when people started asking me about this movie, when I started talking to people afterwards and telling them I'd seen it, I said that this movie, I guess here's my summary and then we can dive in. My summary for this movie is, I think this movie has a lot of focus on the lore of the curse and just back knowledge of the occult. Mm-hmm. So I found this movie much more interesting than I did scary.
Yes.
I found myself very interested in the texts and the rituals and stuff like that. But if the goal was for this movie to be scary, it missed the mark completely for me.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it misses the mark completely. There are some scary moments. I would say the sequence that takes place in the morgue is very tense, and I do think that has some decent moments. I think when the corpse gets up and starts walking around, it's a little weird, but
yeah, Cassidy didn't like that part. But for me personally, as someone that loves scary movies, it was pretty generic for me.
Yeah. My biggest problem with this movie, though, besides it really not knowing what it is and no pun intended here, is the continued demonization of people who are not Christian or not Catholic.
Sure.
Specifically people who hold satanic beliefs. Not all of them believe this kind of stuff. And actually, the current Temple of Satan, Church of Satan, whatever you want to call it, is a very friendly and very social justice focused organization. So this movie really does portray people who aren't Christian, who aren't Catholic in a very negative way, and it continues that from this franchise forward. And I really don't appreciate that, personally. I think that's one of the biggest slights I have against it.
I think at least I would argue to your critique, I don't have the same critique, but to your critique, I could argue or disagree in the sense that I think that when this movie takes place, that was very much the opinion.
Yeah, but you know, if that's not the way, it's kind of, but it's kind of continuing that opinion. It's not doing anything to dissuade you from that opinion. It's like,
I'll
no,
give you
they're
that.
bad. You can't trust a Satanist. I trust them more than I trust any Catholic. I can tell you that right now. Sorry to get any kind of political or rude or anything, but I do. But that point aside, this movie is a lot of fun. I watched this with my brother and his girlfriend, and we had a great time. I mean, usually when it comes to horror movies, I sit there and try and rip it apart. Like, not rip it apart, joke about it, right? And I did during this movie, but this movie is also just genuinely more interesting than a lot of the other Conjuring films.
I'd agree. I
Conjuring
think there was a
universe
lot
films.
more to dig into.
Yeah.
And I think they did a great job of that. Just in terms of, like, I was never, personally, I was never creeped out or felt uncomfortable or, or was even scared, I think, throughout this. There were jump scares for sure, but I don't really attribute that to me being scared. That's more like
Yeah.
that wasn't there and now it is, and that was not fun.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in especially following movies like Hereditary and Midsummer, I mean, it is my bar is so high
Yeah.
for horror that I really have to try to look at this movie through the lens of what it is. And I think it just gets lost in all those generic movies we've gotten. I think it is the least good of the three Conjurings, which I hold the first two in very high regard, as far as like the generic horror movies go. So this one was just really weak for me all around.
Yeah, but it is again, it's still better than I would
You
say.
could do worse, for
Yeah.
sure. You could do worse.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like, it's a great horror film to come back to theaters to after the
Agreed.
pandemic. It gets a lot better than something like, like your generic sequel or like the next Purge or whatever comes out. But so it's still fun. I mean, that's really all we have to say about it. I mean, there's not a lot to spoil in this movie. I'm not. I mean, we won't talk about the villain because the villain I think is very different compared to the other ones in this franchise, which is a refreshing and unique thing. Even though I don't agree with the demonization, but still fun. I mean, if you have HBO Max, it's on HBO Max. You can stream it right now. If you can go see it in theaters, which most theaters are open now, I believe.
Yeah, that's where I
Go.
saw it.
It's a lot of fun to see a horror movie in theaters. Um,
I
but
would say though, if you are gonna spend your money this weekend and you're gonna pick one movie, I would probably choose A Quiet Place Part Two.
mhm.
I think you'll just get it's just an all around better choice.
Yeah,
I mean, you'll see some of those horror themes and those suspense themes. I think this one would, if you were only gonna go see one, I'd see that, and then I would watch this on HBO Max. I don't think this is a miss for me, but I definitely would be if you have the option to see it for free. That's probably how I would see it.
gotcha. So, I mean, my score was already reflected on our Instagram. Make sure you follow us there. I have already given this film a 75. What did you give it?
I give this movie a 68.
Okay.
I think it's. I don't remember what I gave the other ones off the top of my head, to be honest. But this one just like I mean, just the same thing. Like I was certainly interested. I would love to research the real case after watching this movie. It was very interesting. But it's not. It wasn't supposed to be a documentary. It was supposed to be a scary movie, and I feel as for if I'm rating it for what it was, it just did not hit the mark. But again, very interesting. I think if you saw it, you would probably be like, "Oh, I really want to find out about this case. Like, I want to research it."
Yeah, and it's more of a letdown than anything else. I would say the
And
real case is. It sounds very interesting. Then you actually research it, and it's like, eh. I
they
mean,
also really brushed over. I mean, not spoiling it, but they really kind of the crux of the case is told to you in like in passing,
yeah,
and you're
exactly.
like, "Oh, okay," and then like that's it. Like, yeah, it was just I don't know. It just missed for me.
Gotcha. Well, that's going to bring us to an end for this review. Thank you for tuning in here on YouTube. Adrian, where can our listeners and viewers this time find us?
Yeah, you are definitely watching us on YouTube if you're listening to this. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell. We do exclusive content here on YouTube. You'll get spoiler-free reviews like this, and then if the movie's big enough and we really want to dive into it a little deeper, we always do a spoiler-filled review as well for those really, really big ones. But you can catch us here for any exclusive content. We do also post all of our other stuff, but you can also find us on all social media at The Drive Back Podcast. We're especially present on Instagram. We're about to start up on our TikTok. But on Instagram, we post every time we update, so you can also get that notification there. And we also do a lot of comments with people, and we interact a lot, and we get movie suggestions, and we just like to hear from you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Make sure you also tune in on Spotify, iTunes, whatever your podcast app of choice is for our main podcast, The Drive Back, which we have new episodes coming out every Monday, as these videos are a little bit more sporadic and come out just whenever we want them to. But thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys next time here on the Drive Back YouTube channel.